This presentation features work in progress towards my PhD in anthrozoology. Borrowing from participatory action research techniques, I'm working with Cristina Zenato, the self-monikered shark listener, who has dedicated 30 years to co-evolving and maintaining unconventional shark-human relationships with generations of sharks at a particular site in the Bahamas. Some of the relationships lasting 15 years. Before we start, I want to mention there are potential trigger words in this presentation, including suicide and shark. So if you don't feel you want to continue listening, please leave now. Mutta et al. Are amongst scholars that report how the news and entertainment media are widely credited for perpetuating negative portrayals of sharks and for amplifying public fear through newspaper stories and documentaries with sensationalist headlines and imagery. They found that despite evidence that many shark species are at risk of extinction, most media coverage emphasised the risks sharks pose to people. Those joining scholars in the call for change of the media social framing and cultural construction of sharks away from vilification and negativity bias include non-academic activists such as Cristina Zenato, who has been working on campaigns such as Bite Back and Mind Your Language. Negativity bias is the concept imagined by Rosen and Roisman, who hypothesised that greater weight is given to negative entities. And this hypothesis has been applied to try to explain why news media has a negative bias. We pay more attention to the drama, and so newsrooms cultivate, prioritise, and profit from it. One of the themes that emerged from the grounding theory techniques utilised to analyse the interviews between Cristina and I was the negativity bias wielded in UK newspapers' representation of sharks. In developing the methodology for this pilot study, I decided to look at the headlines of the 3 UK newspapers Cristina had mentioned during interviews. So why only look at headlines? Why not the whole article? Well, it's now a media clickbait click world. Robertson et al. Note 89% of Americans find their news sources online. Despite this, for one major online news source, 34% spent only between 1 and 5 minutes on the newspaper's website each month. Effectively, reader attention is limited and newspapers compete for a share through headline packaging. Headline packaging is a technique used by media outlets and is described by Rose Stockwell as the way in which a news story is contextualized or packaged specifically to garner more clicks. According to Rose Stockwell, many people don't click beyond the headlines. The headline is the story, and engaging our emotions in headlines captures our attention. The idea for how to structure the questionnaire came from an online article which said Gawker's Media founder Nick Denton wanted to build an interactive news platform where he said readers should be able to contribute to news stories and determine headlines. Denton utilised a now defunct platform where readers could share their own headlines to news articles, and I thought this would be an interesting experiment for shark headlines. 3 newspapers I looked at were the Daily Mail, the Sun and the Guardian during a 1-month period from the 8th of June to the 3rd of July 2024. I then selected one headline each from a category list I adapted from Lebusque: sensationalist, shark non-attack, shark attack, and created a pilot questionnaire asking several questions, 3 of which will be discussed in this presentation. Please note, attack is a word used by Lebusque and liberally by other shark scholarship authors, highlighting how even pro-shark scholarship can be problematic, as even scholars seeking change can perpetuate negative representations of sharks by utilising the very same words that are considered damaging to the representation of sharks. The wording from here is changed to sensationalism, neutral encounter, and negative encounter being a term used by Cristina. After selecting participants for the pilot, I released the questionnaire between the 18th and the 27th of July 2024 and received 22 responses out of my initial target of receiving 20. Once the results were in, I experimented with the various visual tools as I'm a visual learner and find visuals easier to digest and to present results. I eventually settled on using Excel graphs and word clouds made by tagcloud.com. My preference would have been to use a phrase cloud, but none are currently free or affordable. Each following word cloud shows the word frequency, and the word shark was removed to allow other words to stand out. The word clouds for the 3 newspapers are shown here. The Daily Mail standout words are attack, beach, moment, waters, swimmers, terrified. The Sun's standout words are moment, water, beach, massive, teeth, predator, tourists, horror, jaw, fin and wrestles. And the Guardian's standout words are attack, beach, sands, teen and thriller. So question 1 was, from your perspective and having looked at the photo on a scale of 1 not justified to 5 justified, how justified do you think the headline is in exploiting the fear of sharks? So these 2 graphs show the scale for the 3 individual headlines and the headlines combined. First graph shows the results as numbers and the second as percentages. The colour for headline 1 is green, headline 2 blue, headline 3 grey and overall purple. As you can see from the line skimming the top of the purple columns, there's an implied overall trend for the headline's use of fear to be considered not justified, with some nuances for each individual headline. I had expected headline 1, a headline I classified as in the sensationalist category, shown here in green, to show more than 32% of the participants saying the use of fear was not justified. As a reflective point, the image for this headline I felt showed a presumed family looking at a fin in the water. And of course, fins do not necessarily belong to sharks and not necessarily carnivorous sharks. I should perhaps ask for iteration 2 of the questionnaire, what does the image show? Although the people watching in the photograph appear to be showing no fear and just watching the fin, 14 out of 22 participants, or 63%, thought there was some justification for the use of fear. Casola et al. Tell us framing theory suggests the way in which information is presented influences how it is processed, and the positive or negative framing of sharks influences people's attitudes and perceptions of sharks. Second headline, which I categorised as a neutral encounter and was headlined as the suicide of a shark determined to die, I included as my perspective was that it was quite silly and that the use of fear was completely unjustified. However, only 16 participants, or 72%, thought there was no justification of the use of fear. 24% thought there was justification to some extent, and one person didn't know. In fact, 2 or 9 people thought the use of fear was completely justified, although the shark was reported as dead. Headline 3, the headline covering a negative encounter, was again surprising to me. I had expected a heavy lean towards mostly or completely justified, especially as someone had been bitten. However, 2 thought there was no justification, and only 10 out of 22, or 45%, thought there was a high level of justification. Headline 3 was a shark-human interaction that resulted in a bite. From the picture headline only, there was no indication of whether there was human provocation or not, which could change the context and results. Second question was, what words and phrases do you feel are used to instill emotions in the reader? List as many as you like. The word clouds for the 3 headlines are shown here. Standout words for headline 1 are terrifying, speed, sparking, fear, forced swims, towards, fast, attacks, and implies. For headline 2, serrated, predator, teeth, suicidal, giant, determined, beach, die, holiday, tragedy, Brit favourite, implies, humans, and instills. And for headline 3, bites, hospital, disrupted, solo, encounters, contact, holiday, and taken. Question 3 asked, how would you rewrite the title based upon the article content and your knowledge of sharks? And while the participant rewrites will be included in the paper, for brevity here, I created word clouds to show the standout words: beach, closed, shore and swimming, beach, dead, washed up, beach, bites, celebrated, disrupted, encounters, 4th of July, Texas, swimming, swimmers, bathers, island, holiday, short and solo. So then I wanted to look at these in conjunction with question 2. Did the participants use words they said instill fear in their own replies when rewriting the headlines? In headline 1, 3 people did. Reused words were towards, 7 foot, swimming, fast. Headline 2, 2 people did. Reused words were tragedy, tragic, 8 foot, Brit favourite, holiday, beach, and 8 foot. And headline 3, 5 people out of 22 used the same words. Solo, 4 people, hospital, bites, bite, bitten, and disrupted. This is something I now need to think about. Maybe what I need to ask in the second iteration is, in rewriting the headline, are you intending to reduce fear, increase, or maintain it? And then ask how they would rewrite it. I'm searching for intention when I could ask the participants to make it explicit. I then made subjective judgments of the narrative shift in the rewritten headlines, and the results are shown in these graphs. Headline 1 is shown in green, headline 2 is blue, headline 3 as grey, and overall as pink. So again, for brevity, I'm just going to whiz through these results. So for headline 1, where the headline is not rewritten, or it is rewritten but the narrative has not changed, 11 or 50% maintained the fear, and 7 or 32% had a narrative shift towards a more positive representation. For headline 2, where people who didn't rewrite the headline or did rewrite it but the narrative shift didn't change, only 3 or 14% maintained the fear narrative, and 13 or 59% had a narrative shift towards a more positive representation. For headline 3, where the headline was not rewritten or was rewritten, but the narrative shift didn't change, 19 or 87% of participants maintained the fear narrative, and only 2 or 9% had a narrative shift towards the positive. I then wanted to look at the justification assessment compared to the narrative shift. I expected the justification assessment to go with the narrative shift. For brevity again, I'm going to only look at the overall figures. As you can see, justification and narrative shift did not match for all the headlines or for all the justification categories. So perhaps I need to ask explicitly for iteration 2, are you intending to make this headline more or less fearful? Also, it was my subjective assessment whether it was a narrative shift or not, and I need to eliminate this bias in the next iteration. There are other questions to be asked though, such as even if we feel there should be a narrative shift, are we culturally encumbered in using the same words when describing sharks? So following grounded theory, I did some coding myself on the 3 headlines. I'm going to show these overall themes which emerged. Threat, disruption, and agency. The headlines talk about the disruption of beaches closed to the public. And now for some, there's a potential risk and anxiety level involved in holidays. Holidays can be considered sacred spaces and times and are often worked hard for. Hamilton and Ford tell us the human right to leisure is enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and raises philosophical and ethical implications in respect of human rights taking precedent over a species' right to live in its environment. They go on to say media representation has fueled public imagination, perpetuating fear and negative stereotypes of sharks and hysteria surrounding shark-human interactions. And Peace suggests there's a liminal zone of the coastline that supports both species. As such, sharks are often stated to be violating, encroaching on, intruding into, stalking, lurking, prowling, loitering, and marauding into these vicinities. Again, giving negative connotations and criminalised intent-laden terms to a natural and rarely negative shark behaviour, swimming in their natural environment. And this brings me to agency. There's an implied intent, an implied agency, an implied contact without provocation from the shark onto the human victim. The shark is blamed and criminalised. As Neff says, word usage elicits emotions, paints a picture and allocates blame. And he goes on to say, in this case, sharks swimming is no longer considered innocent behaviour. Instead, this patrolling or cruising constitutes a threat. In terms of threat, Chapman tells us the use of descriptive language over emotive language can quickly change the tone of a media report and can influence the audience's opinion of or reaction to a topic. Before I finish, I just want to come on to the effect of media on sharks. Despite the intention of the news, despite the intention of clickbait, there can be revenge attacks. Chapman tells us when there's been an attack, you can sense a desire for revenge, not always from the victims or their families, but from the public at large, with a desire to regain a sense of control and mastery. And as Neff tells us, when Peter Benchley's book Jaws appeared, the story of a rogue shark terrorising a seaside town brought the graphic fear of criminal shark home to millions. The enactment of anti-shark policies, including shark hunts, shark derbies, and the installation of beach nets became punitive measures for the perceived public good. Recreational monster fishing for sharks skyrocketed, and shark kill tournaments in the USA became more popular than ever. More recently, real shark hunts mirroring the fictional response have been seen following clusters of shark bites in several countries. The deeply embedded expectation of any shark-human encounter becoming a bloodshed moment also fits nicely into the media saying, if it bleeds, it leads, commodifying fear not only of sharks but human victims in different scenarios. Ozzy Minko and Lorena argue that one of the goals of media is to create the fearful subject, someone who is easy to manipulate. The use of fear, risk, and threat is liberally applied to shark discourse, despite their dwindling numbers and human-on-shark kills surpassing shark-human injuries and fatalities, and the repeated overemphasis of shark-human risk. Such discourse influences how sharks are represented as a fearful subject. This perpetuates and emphasises the feedback loop of the fear of sharks, influencing social anxiety, despite there being over 520 species of sharks with different characteristics, and is reiterated in media through documentaries, books, movies, social media, and newspapers, etc., to the extent that sharks become some of the most feared more than human animals. And Mills tells us that shark representations in movies usually mean the shark must die for the story to end and for all to be well. There's much more to be said, which I'll try to address in the paper. In the meantime, I'll leave you with a few thoughts. Here is another word cloud, which I made from the participants' answers to the question, what words come to mind when you think of sharks? List as many as you want, which perhaps gives us an insight into the participants' perspectives and biases. Standout words in the negative category were teeth, dangerous, powerful, predator, and hunters, and in the positive category, beautiful and awe. While I need to do further examination of the data captured, adjust the questionnaire and reissue to a wider audience, I also want to add a category missing from a great chunk of shark research, a positive category of shark-human relationships. And with that, I want to leave you with Cristina and some footage of her and the sharks that she has unconventional relationships with, showing positive representations of sharks.
There There is a vast discrepancy between real-life shark encounters and the perpetrated negative and damaging images used by the media. Do not believe everything you read.